Even though the Greek realm was being poisoned by the presence of these Roman bastards, the Athenian nobles had their focus elsewhere. Namely this new growing trade union composed of Pergamon, Galatia, Iconian and Ptolemaic Egypt. All nations with favorable opinions of us, but so far had denied our merchants. As a matter of fact, the Egyptians ended their trade agreement with us, and thus challenging our stance of neutrality in any major conflict, such as the one they have with the Seleucids. This was a major concern for us, as Athens, heck even all of the Aegean, was defended by no more than Chremonides our Archon and his ground forces. Nowhere near enough, especially as this Punic conflict was spreading into the seas we controlled. Hence we began working on mustering a new fleet at Crete to safeguard our homeland as well as the trade lanes flowing through the Aegean. Additionally, we established a military training field in Athens to help enhance the capabilities of our statesmen. While tension was brewing back home, a literal war was taking place in Iberia. The Aravaci recently slaughtered our client state. Although they only served us for a short while, it was enough for Glaucus to feel responsible for this. If not at least give us a reason to take their precious resources for our own. So as we passed through Iberia, which quickly had turned into a Hellenic war camp, we hired 3 units of pikemen. As our spies revealed the Iberians were beginning to reinforce the south, we had to act fast even though it meant moving deeper into this peninsula. So we formed up our formation near this ridge to protect our left flank, while we kept our newly acquired pikemen in reserve to defend the rear. Initially we sent out some of our cavalry to cause chaos, but as we discovered some of the Iberians had weakened their position, we charged. This also meant we entered enemy line of fire, causing massive casualties on our forces, especially the pikemen. Due to this cliffside, the battle basically turned into 2 separate battles, with the Hellenic forces clearly faring better than our Iberian units. For that reason, Glaucus himself charged straight into the struggle, dismounting and fought alongside his army, inspiring his soldiers to victory. Continuing our tradition, we looted the settlement, increasing our wealth significantly. Furthermore, the settlement gave us access to a new unique Iberian unit to bolster our wounded forces for when the Aravaci would retaliate. This strike showed our resolve and willingness to serve justice, which must have been what encouraged the Egyptians as well as the Seleucids to re-establish trade. Neutrality apparently prevailed, hence we denied their request for a non-aggression pact also. Research-wise, we began working on ways to improve our blacksmith. It was a must if we were to control Greece. Once again, our spies discovered something fascinating. Apparently the Aravaci had all their forces outside of Iberia at a massive port on the other side of the Pyrenees mountains. If there was a port, there was an opportunity for us. So Cleisthenes and his skilled marines reinforced their numbers for the upcoming voyage north. This decision came with a dilemma, as Rome had gained firm control over Sicily. If this trend continued, they would inevitably take control of all of the Carthaginian lands. And we simply cannot allow the Romans to enter Iberia. We had to claim their lands, especially the Pillars of Heracles. Nevertheless, Cleisthenes set sail. We could only imagine the port was being undefended, as their forces were marching south to face Glaucus. But as the Aravaci didn't attack as one army, we used our guerrilla tactics in the hopes of ambushing and overwhelming their smaller force before the second arrived. As we realized they were approaching from the south, we sent down our pikemen to block the streets, preparing to intercept the barbarians. By the time we had destroyed the first army, the other had engaged our forces, meaning there was no time to rest for our guerrilla warriors. Almost all of the Arevaci had committed to combat. Glaucus and his cavalry revealed themselves to smite down the hostile skirmishers. Once that was done, we called out our own to fire straight into the rear of the barbarians. This was so effective, we carved through their forces as if nothing was there, all thanks to our own proper Greek units holding the line, not giving an inch of ground to the enemy. Anyone we captured was enslaved or sold by Glaucus. After the battle, he also gave up command to his son Isocrates, named after the admiral who took Crete. Despite his looks, he was actually no more than 16 years old, meaning this was a heavy burden laid upon his shoulders. Back in Greece, we had by now begun upgrading the housing of both Athens and Hirapitna. Any coin to spare was invested into our new defensive fleet. Economy-wise, it was evident the slave trade almost paid for all our ground forces. Alas, it still had to be supported by our export, which was being boosted by our tariff enhancements, slowly becoming more valuable as we expanded our resource production. But by the winter of 259, the Romans had begun their invasion of Africa, and thus laid siege to Carthage. We had to be ready. But Cleisthenes refused to leave his course. He made his move for the Arevaci port, in the middle of a blizzard. Just like Olisipo, this was a major settlement with watchtowers defending the shoreline. However, at this settlement, the beach was split up into two parts, with the larger of the two being covered with great skirmisher positions and choke points, although this left an easy route towards the town square. Luckily, the Iberians decided to meet us along the shore. Our archer ships tried to burn down their towers but got denied by the blizzard, forcing us to take on the Iberians in melee. Thankfully, our Heptares warships from Rhodes, we almost overwhelmed the Iberians on the beach. However, we didn't land all our marines at this exact beach here. A small handful was sent around into the harbor itself. This would help us deal with the Iberians holding the choke points. Our skilled marines simply outmaneuvered the hostiles, securing us the port in Gallia. Breaking our tradition, we only occupied the settlement. This was mainly because I expected this specific port to be quite isolated. A wholly safe haven perhaps, where merchants would be able to pray before continuing their voyage further north or back home. In order to secure the safety of the settlement even further, we established trade with the local tribes, whose enemies we just defeated. We even established trade with this other Greek colony from the first age of colonization. I feared they could become a rival in the future, but for now, we Greeks had to stand together in these distant lands. This victory of ours left the remaining Arevaci villages in the heart of Iberia. We had to finish them off, so the 16-year-old Isocrates marched out to take on whatever forces they had left. Originally, I kept all my forces on this hill, but after a few moments I realized we were the ones to go on the offensive. For that reason, we ordered some of our cavalry out on the far left. We advanced until our slingers were in range of the hostile skirmishers. However, this was the moment I realized our units actually by accident were perfectly positioned for the oblique order attack, where we would advance on one flank and retreat on the other. The heaviest of our Iberian units hammered into the Arevaci, with our cavalry rapidly approaching from the hills, massively overwhelming that flank. A crucial part of this battle was the fact that a massive gap opened up between our pike corps and right flank, revealing a key path for our reserve cavalry to approach from. This included Isocrates himself, who personally dismounted behind the enemy lines, alongside his bodyguards. Such a crazy maneuver routed all the Arevaci, leading to one of the finest battles in Athenian history. He might only be 16 years old, but Isocrates definitely was a fierce commander, worthy of leading the Iberian regiment. We quickly seized another key resource settlement, which also was the capital of the Arevaci, Surely they sought to take it back with so many forces nearby. We also hoped this meant the Iberians wouldn't march north again, as we used all our gold on constructing sacred grounds and an agora. A rebellion immediately rose as a result of this. However, we just enlisted a new governor or protector, you may call him, who along with the fleet pacified the region. After this, we reinforced our defenses at the major cities in our new colony, for defensive measures only. By now the jewel of Africa had fallen to Rome. Carthage was sure to crumble now. So this basically meant we had to execute our emergency plan to ensure Rome didn't enter Iberia. We had to secure control over the Pillars of Heracles. However, our ships were all in the north and supposedly didn't intend on sailing south either. Instead, they engaged in combat with a random Gallic faction, where Cleisthenes easily carved through the hostile ships, which didn't stand a chance against our mighty Tryres. Or so was the expectations until the following engagement, where Cleisthenes and his elite marines simply got overwhelmed by the sheer size of the Gallic fleet. Sure, we took down many hostile ships, but the casualties were too expensive. We lost most of our marines in this miserable engagement. We simply weren't ready to venture this far north yet. So we sailed straight back to Olisipo again to replenish. Although our fleet was at last returning south again, we still had to deal with the Aravaci before we could make our move on Carthage. So Socrates laid a trap with the copper mine as the bait. And sure enough, it worked, with us catching the last true Iberian threat completely off guard. Our ambush was initiated by us releasing fireballs straight into the hostile lines, carving through their ranks, getting a lucky curve, resulting in way more casualties than expected. The Aravaci didn't stand a chance. We captured so many hostiles, we had to expand our slave trader in the colonies. This was possible due to our trade with Macedon, who held Odessus and its slave resources. Additionally, the Gallic tribe we fought in the north made compelling arguments for peace, which we agreed to. Furthermore, threats of slave revolt started to spread in our new sacred city. Though this was resolved by making this sacred city a tax-free settlement, as well as making the stationed fleet return to the waves. After this, we finished off the Aravaci, liberating their last settlement. We established trade with this new tribal ally of ours, but afterwards actually realized this might have had more consequences than anticipated. The Astures were pretty much hated by the Galaici and our new Gallic trade partners. Nevertheless, we began constructing a temple of Zeus, and inevitably also one for Athena up in Gallia. The now proven 17-year-old commander turned into a skilled drill master, making our levies, which was basically our entire army, extremely skilled and capable fighters. Exactly what we needed for our next task. Now we were in a prime position to deal with Carthage, take control of the only way in or out of the Mediterranean, and thus limit the Romans from expanding too far west. We had to break our policy of neutrality.